GB News, it's 7 o'clock and goodness me, another huge day, a lot to talk about. More chaos in the whole Rwanda debate, we'll be getting into that. Boris, of course, has been at the COVID inquiry for his second day of evidence and a bunch more time and opportunity wasted. Some unbelievable scenes in the United States, anti-Semitism amongst some of the best universities in the States. What is going on over there? And of course, Derek Chisora will be in the studio at the back end of the show to talk about I'm a Celebrity. You will not want to miss that. Loads of that, but first of all, of course, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Richard, thank you. The top story this hour, Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, has hacked high-profile MPs in what the government is saying was a sustained effort to interfere in British politics. The Deputy Prime Minister said today peers, civil servants, journalists and non-governmental organisations have also been targeted. It's understood politicians had their personal email accounts compromised, and Oliver Dowden said the cyber attack is a clear pattern of behaviour by Russia, adding that those responsible would be held to account.
I can tell you that a unit within the Russian Federal Security Service, known as Centre 18, has been behind sustained hostile cyber operations aimed at interfering in parts of the UK's democratic processes. This has included targeting members of Parliament, civil servants, think tanks, journalists and NGOs.
Meanwhile, the first vote on the new emergency Rwanda legislation will be put through Parliament on Tuesday next week. The Prime Minister defending the government's plan, describing it as the country's toughest anti-immigration law. He acknowledged, though, some disapproved of the bill, but said it addressed concerns raised by the Supreme Court. The Prime Minister insists the government will get asylum flights off the ground.
This bill blocks every single reason that has ever been used to prevent flights to Rwanda from taking off. As the Rwandans themselves have made clear, if we go any further, the entire scheme will collapse. And there is no point having a bill with nowhere to send people to. But I'm telling you now, we have set the bar so high that it will be vanishingly rare for anyone to meet it.
Rishi Sunak, now at the COVID inquiry today. Boris Johnson rejected claims that he didn't care about the suffering inflicted on the country during the coronavirus pandemic, a warning there are some flashing images coming up if you're watching on TV. The former Prime Minister was answering questions about parties at number 10 Downing Street during lockdown, and he says the idea that there was mass rule-breaking at the time is a million miles from the truth. He also admitted that a trip to Barnard Castle by his former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, was a bad moment. The Foreign Secretary says blocking Ukraine aid would be a Christmas present to Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Lord David Cameron, the new Foreign Secretary, has sent a warning after Senate Republicans in the United States opposed a multi-billion-dollar aid package. He urged allies to rally round Kyiv, describing the response to the conflict as the greatest test of our generation, as he delivered a speech in Washington today. It comes as US Congress failed to pass an £88 billion package of wartime funding for Ukraine and for Israel. That's the news on GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thank you very much, Polly, and welcome back to Farage here on GB News. Well, another day. Is there much to discuss? Yes, of course, because we've had an emergency press conference. There seem to be quite a few of those recently. What's it about this time? Well, of course, it's about Rwanda. Let me just step back for a minute. How often have you done something for a boss or a friend or a member of the family that you know, frankly, is just a complete waste of time? It's not going to achieve anything, it's unproductive, it might waste a bunch of cash, but you do it anyway. We've all been there. Here's the thing about this whole Rwanda policy, the whole strategy. It was supposed to be a deterrent. But let me suggest to you that actually what it really is, it's just a dead cat strategy. And I think I've got a little picture on here of, now, don't worry, it's not a real one. It's a furry cat. But the symbolism of that, you see, you've looked at it. You've wondered, what on earth is that? It's distracted you. It's taken your mind away from the real issue of the day, which is that tens of thousands of illegal migrants are coming across the English Channel every year. Now, how long has the government been working on this dead cat strategy? There it is still. Just remind ourselves, a year and 3 quarters, they've been talking about this, and here we are, December 23, almost 30,000 migrants have come across this year. The cost of those 30,000 is well over £1 billion in just 1 year. But no one's really been talking about that. Where's the discussion about, well, how do we process the backlog faster? Where's the discussion about how do we stop the illegal working? Do you see, everybody's been talking about Rwanda. And yet it's not a deterrent in my view. Why would it be a deterrent? And we've actually now got the proof from Mark White's interviews with migrants. Migrants in Calais, they're laughing at the idea. The chance of a few hundred, possibly 1,000 being sent to Rwanda out of 30,000, you'll take the punt, won't you? The dead cat strategy. Imagine if all of that money, that time, the brains, the expertise and the wisdom in Westminster, oxymoron possibly, the wisdom in Westminster, they're focused on getting rid of the backlog, stopping the illegal working. Maybe that's a better use of their time, their effort and their money. To my mind, it's not a deterrent. It's a complete distraction, complete waste of time. So that's my question to you folks. This extraordinary strategy, is it a deterrent or is it just a waste of time? Email me farage@gbnews.com or tweet using the hashtag Farage on GB News. Well, I'm delighted to fantastic guests in the studio. To my right, Philip Blond, former advisor to David Cameron, director of the Res Publica think tank, and also Fadi Farhad, a senior legal consultant at Gulbenkian Andonian Lawyers. Gentlemen, a very good evening. Thank you. I'm going to turn to you first, Philip. So, I mean, you've got serious experience from the Cameron days of the Conservative Party. This is not Plan A, it's not Plan B. Is it Plan W, Z? I mean, where is it in the spectrum of a disaster?
Well, the disaster has been ongoing for quite some time. The collapse of Conservative support from the heady days of 2019 is the long disaster, if you will, and this is but the latest iteration. Where we are now is that the Conservative Party are polling circa 20%. Now, that reads into one of the most catastrophic electoral disasters that one can imagine, possibly heading toward one of the greatest ever, certainly worse than Blair's victory in '97. So we're looking at something where they could be under 150 seats. With the latest polling after this more recent debacle could push them even below 100 seats. That's where the Conservative Party is now currently.
But Rishi Sunak was appointed as the grown-up in the room, the man of competence, who would get stuff done, and he had his pledges, he's delivered one of his 5 pledges, but he did say that he would stop the boats, and here we are 11 months later, and
well, you can understand why. So I think Boris has many merits, but being organised and moving from kind of principle to action isn't perhaps one of them. So you had kind of Boris's, how do we put it, inability to act and organise. Then you had the trust budget fiasco. So you understand why people went for competence.
Yeah, but going back to Boris, when Boris introduced this Rwanda policy a year and 3 quarters ago, I mean, he foresaw that the lawyers would attack it, but he said it was worth the effort.
Look, deterrent is needed. It worked for Australia when they finally got a radical deterrent strategy in Australia under Tony Abbott. It worked.
Correct.
And migration stopped.
Yep.
Deterrence needs to be in the mix to deter illegal migration for all the reasons that we know. If Rwanda worked, and if it worked at scale, and if it was uncapped, then it would work as a deterrent.
There's a lot of ifs there, but you've just used the key word uncapped at scale, neither of which, as I understand, is actually part of this Rwanda scheme. It's a few hundred, maybe up to 1,000.
Well, no, there's no cap. So the problem with the Rwanda scheme as currently offered is it isn't the high bar that the Prime Minister or the Home Secretary talked about. Actually, the appeal that is still open under Section 4 of the bill means that what happened in June 2022, when the flight was on the tarmac and every single person on that flight made an individual application to the courts citing mental illness, inability to... That is still there,
well,
and it would be used again. So I'm afraid that appeal, narrow as it is, isn't cut off. So
that's
the
not
same
thing
would happen again.
With Fadi. Thank you for waiting. So you're an immigration lawyer. You understand these things. Philip's point there that, I mean, it's incredibly complex. You read this bill, they say there's lots of notwithstanding clauses. The Prime Minister, sort of slightly frustrated this morning, says it's going to work. This is the toughest ever. And yet, it seems there's a little bit of wiggle room through which many people, maybe all of the asylum seekers, may try to sort of wriggle through.
Indeed, Richard, there's a lot of wriggle room in terms of individual cases, but there's even in terms of the actual overall structure, that's not done and dusted at all. From just putting on my legal hat, it seems to be that this is just a repackaging in treaty form, which is a more serious instrument, but it's just simply a repackaging of the original memorandum. All they've done is reshuffle it and put it into treaty form, but they haven't specifically addressed the factual determination made by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court talked about capacity issues. It talked about Rwanda breaching its previous agreements with Israel and other international treaties, such as the ICCPR, and it talked about, for example, the British police issuing...
But the main point was they ruled that Rwanda was not a safe country.
And that's the factual determination, and based on these things. What this treaty does is it doesn't address any of those. It just simply says that we are putting into treaty form that Rwanda is going to provide assurances.
That's the new treaty. But the bill that they're trying to get through the House of Commons and then with a lot of hard work through the House of Lords,
yes,
the Prime Minister is saying this is the toughest bill that's ever gone through with regard to immigration, and it will work. And yet, lots of lawyers, almost most lawyers that I talk to, say, well, on individual cases, there's wriggle room.
On individual cases, there's wriggle room.
But it says, what else is there apart from individual cases? Every case is individual.
Yes, so you've always got that as an individual case. In terms of your own individual circumstances, you can always...
But it's not like they apply as a collective. Everyone is an individual case. There's wriggle room for individuals, so the whole thing's a farce. It's a waste of time.
So the entire thing could potentially collapse just on a case-by-case basis, yes.
Just remarkable. 155 million quid, a year and 3 quarters, and the answer is we're no more advanced. I mean, it's a farce.
It's a farce, and there's always this talk of deterring the smugglers, and I never hear anything about catching the smugglers. So in terms of actual enforcement, where the money can go into real old-fashioned enforcement, there's no talk of that.
In fairness, actually, I mean, Keir Starmer has talked about a greater effort to catch the smugglers. I think, actually, Boris and co, Home Secretaries have talked about that. But in reality, they're incredibly smart. And if you catch one, guess what? Someone else will basically fill that vacancy. I mean, that's what happens in the criminal world, whether we like it or not. I don't think that's the thing. I think Philip's right. It's the deterrent. But you touched on Australia. In Australia, they pushed back, they picked up and they took elsewhere. In my view, the only way this stops, both on the English Channel and the Mediterranean, is when you have the courage to safely pick up and take back to France, take back to North Africa. At that moment, the whole thing stops. That requires courageous leadership.
Well, where we are is also, there's also a problem with Section 5. You could still make an appeal to the Strasbourg court. The Attorney General still views that as binding, even because there isn't a clause in Section 5 that says appeals to the Strasbourg court are non-binding. That isn't in the present treaty. So you could have the whole system still invalidated. So there are two serious fundamental legal weaknesses with the bill as it stands.
Which, in fairness, the former Home Secretary, Chisora highlighted to the Prime Minister. She got fired for it. Turns out she's right.
I'm afraid Suella has been proven right in many cases. I think she was brave and correct to call out the double standard of policing that we've seen, which is largely because the Metropolitan Police reports to the Mayor of London, not the government. And she was right about calling them the marchers hate marchers.
Philip, thank you very much indeed. Fadi, just finally, where does it go from here? Or is basically this is just an excuse for lawyers to make a lot of money over the next 12 months until there's an election?
Well, perhaps that, but I think we're just going to continue, and I think by the time we get to a general election, I think everything will be unpacked and reset. It'll be gone. Gentlemen, thank you so much indeed. I'm sorry, folks, we've got no answers here except don't expect this to be a deterrent that works any time soon. Well, coming up after the break, another day of Boris Johnson in the COVID inquiry being grilled by the barrister that, in my view, has been asking yet again completely the wrong questions. Oh, and there's a QR code, of course, to tell you how to vote for Nigel because it's another tense day, another tense evening. Don't go anywhere. It's GB News.
Earlier with Eamon and Isabel.
So today we're asking about lockdowns. Do you think that they did more harm than good?
You can't have no plan in place. You can't suggest that just...
They had a pandemic plan. They had a pandemic plan, they ignored it. We should have protected the vulnerable.
Ben Habib, what do you make of the situation?
The people smugglers are not deterred at all by any of the measures, including, obviously, Rwanda.
If I was in Parliament and I could say, right, Isabel Webster is the Queen of Sheba, total nonsense.
Very good idea.
I don't know what the Queen of Sheba would actually think about that.
Pat McFadden, we say good morning to him.
I've got milk in the fridge that can last longer than some Tory ministers, and it's no way to run a country.
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
Monday to Thursday.
From 6 a.m.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage. Well, I tell you what, I've just worked it out. If you want to do well, become a lawyer. I mean, we've just heard it on my previous guests. You know, the legal system is making fortunes out of this. In the next section, we're going to be talking about the COVID inquiry. And it seems it's just a room full of lawyers. Meanwhile, the audience reaction is in. Robert says the policy's finished. It was never needed if the French had cleared the camps and stopped the migrants going to the coast. Good point. Steve, however, has a different take on it. Steve says, I think Rishi's plan today seems good to try and stop the boats. I think it's fair to say he has tried to stop the boats, but he's failed. 30,000. Here we are. Diane says, stop the boats tomorrow. Stop bringing them into our shore, turn them round, don't let them land, simple and no cost. Well, as Philip was saying, and as I know, that's what they did in Australia. They pushed back, and that worked. And in my view, that's the only thing that will stop it. Robert says the government's totally failed to control immigration. There's no serious deterrent with the Rwanda plan. It's a distraction. I agree entirely. It is a distraction. It's a complete nonsense. Focus on what works. That's how you should be spending your time and effort. Talking focus, it seems to me that before I go into the COVID inquiry, of course, Nigel, the king of the jungle, he needs your votes. It's getting tense. It's getting stressed. There's only 3 nights to go until the final. Later in the show, I've got Derek Chisora coming in to talk about it. But you've got to download the app. You've got 5 free votes. He needs every single one. It's on the App Store. There's a QR code on the screen. Or, if that doesn't work for you, call 644-2409 on your mobile, or you can call from a landline 09020 44 2409. Every single vote will become absolutely critical. Well, we've had another day of questions to the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, at the COVID inquiry by Hugo Keith, KC, the barrister that I touched on yesterday. I wasn't very happy yesterday with the line of his questions, and was it a good use of his time? Well, today we learnt about more questions about Partygate, more questions about how advisable it was for Dominic Cummings to go to Barnard Castle. We had more questions about some of the words he wrote on notes. Completely irrelevant, in my view, to the terms of reference in the inquiry. What are the lessons learned? How were decisions made? And delighted to be joined in the studio. Alex Crowley, you know Boris Johnson well. You were a former political advisor to him when he was Prime Minister and Mayor of London previously. I mean, he looked quite frustrated a couple of times today at the line of questioning that sort of, it was continuing the sort of the whole gotcha moment. I mean, 2 days of his time, great opportunity to get his deep thoughts. Am I right in thinking that it's just time wasted?
Well, it was interesting. The first day, Boris had a very different demeanour because the questions were a lot more, I thought, sensible. And actually, we got some quite interesting insights from a man who was in the hot seat at a time, a completely unprecedented time. And actually, he was quite emotional at points. And it's very rare you see Boris display any kind of emotion other than kind of jocular humour. And I thought that was very interesting. And you compare that to the second day, where the questions were, if you like, a lot more, he would have been a lot more familiar with the tone. It felt a bit like an MP Select Committee at points. And of course, he's very comfortable with that. He's very comfortable with people attacking him because he's spent his whole career with people attacking him. And so you're right, we perhaps missed a slight opportunity to get a bit more insight that we could have got.
But the whole point here is the terms of reference to this inquiry are clear. Lessons have got to be learned, report in a timely fashion, and look at international comparisons in order to see how we compared with other nations. And the barrister today, he started going on about the eat out to help out and whether that worked or didn't. And actually, it was another gotcha moment of, did it cause an acceleration of the cases? What he completely failed to do, folks, was to draw the international comparison. But I've got it for you here. This is the graph that shows, I know it's a bit faint, but it shows the line of the United Kingdom and France in around September 2020 and Portugal. And the growth in cases was actually steeper in France than it was in the United Kingdom. At exactly the same time, France didn't have an Eat Out to Help Out scheme like we did. So if the barrister had bothered to look at the international comparisons and evidence, he would have seen that actually it was a complete wrong line of questioning. Look, the cases went up. It was heading towards winter. I just feel that he's got this completely wrong, the most valuable chance to talk to the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, and he's not taken advantage of it. He's wasted it again.
I think we have to decide what we want from this inquiry, and ultimately it'll be up to Lady Hallett to judge on these questions. But as a society, what do we want from this exercise, right? I think what we want from this exercise is to understand how can this country be better prepared when something like this happens again, and it will.
Thank heavens you've said that, because that's not a question, I understand, that the barrister asked the former Prime Minister in 2 whole days. I mean, I just find that scandalous.
And that, you know, and that is, to be fair, in the terms of reference of the inquiry, and that's hopefully where we are going to end up. And of course, in the middle, we are going to get some of these issues come up, and perhaps
but
some of them aren't
surely
as
to hear
relevant.
Boris's thoughts, the man at the centre of this, making these impossibly difficult decisions, he's had time to reflect. What would he have done differently? Why wasn't that question properly asked, really examined over half an hour or so? That's surely what we should have been learning from this.
Yes, actually, he wrapped up his testimony at the end today saying actually he was quite happy to do more, but precisely to explore some of those issues. And, you know, I don't think him appearing in front of the inquiry, as other former Prime Ministers have down the ages, they never tend to change people's opinions that much. If you didn't like the person beforehand, you're not going to like them now, and vice versa. If you like them, you're probably still going to like them. We can, of course, indulge in a blame exercise. We can say that it was all the politicians' fault.
But it's not that helpful. It's all about,
but it doesn't really help.
All about the lessons are learned so that when it happens again, actually we're better prepared.
Yeah, and also, and it's a useful exercise for everyone to just appreciate the position that he was in. Now, you can like him, you can hate him. That's fair enough.
I get that.
But he had to make probably the most difficult set of decisions, arguably, since the war.
Without question. Alex Crowley, thank you so much indeed for sharing those thoughts with you. Well, that's my thoughts on the COVID inquiry. I tell you what, in the next section, you will not believe what's been going on in the United States with 3 of the top universities. Extraordinary testimony that will shock you all. Don't go anywhere, it's GB News.
On State of the Nation tonight at 8 o'clock. The Prime Minister comes out fighting on immigration after a tough week. Is Rishi Sunak's plan destined to fail? Or does it just need a bit of faith to succeed? Lord Cameron is on a diplomatic mission to reaffirm US support for Ukraine after Republicans oppose President Biden's aid package. Will his charm and charisma do the trick in keeping the American right on course? Today, Boris Johnson is once more grilled in front of the COVID inquiry, and the book club returns, with a former senior number 10 advisor, Samuel Kasumu, giving us a first-hand account of being the outsider.
Tune in tonight at 8 o'clock.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Country Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage. Well, over in the United States, this is truly unbelievable. During a congressional hearing in the House of Representatives, 3 leaders of some of the top universities of MIT, Harvard, and the University of Pennsylvania repeatedly failed to answer this simple question whether calling for the genocide of Jews went against their code of conduct. Just take
Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment.
So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
Yes
speech
or no?
becomes if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
That was the head of the University of Pennsylvania. Truly unbelievable. Well, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio now by the founder of the Israel Advocacy Movement, Joseph Cohen, to discuss this. Joseph, in a sense, I'd much rather you weren't in the studio because we shouldn't have to be discussing this. It's unbelievable. I nearly fell over with anger when I watched that video. What is going on here?
I mean, as a Jew, it's terrifying. The fact that anti-Semitism in the last month in the UK has risen by 800%, and you've got a president of a university refusing to say that this goes against the university's code of conduct, the call for genocide of any people. And the thing to really dwell on here is this is a university that will see speech as violence, words as violence. If you misgender someone, if you stray into any of these areas, then they will act. But if you call for the genocide of the Jewish people 2 months after the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, nothing.
I mean, she basically said, and actually there were 3 separate heads of these universities, and all of them basically used almost exactly the same language that, well, it depends on the context. How is calling for the genocide of Jews? I mean, it's a question of fact and violence as opposed to context.
And she actually added something. She said, if it turns into conduct, what does that mean? If someone acts on it and actually genocides the Jews, then it's against our policy. But inciting it, calling for it, no, that's...
But why is this going on? What's in their heads? I mean, these are clearly intelligent, smart people.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, people have got themselves so tied up in knots with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that they're unable to see racism when it's staring them in the face. They're unable to see genocidal racism when it's looking at them in the face.
I hesitate to ask this question, but what do you think the heads of Oxford and Cambridge universities would say if they were asked exactly the same question?
I'd hope after seeing the backlash from this they wouldn't respond in the same way. But had there not been this backlash, I think we suffer from the same problems in our institutions. There was actually a case in Bristol not so long ago with a professor who was accused of anti-Semitism, and hundreds of academics came out in support of him, and then this academic was ultimately fired.
Do you think those three heads should be fired? I mean, do you think the pressure will be so intense that actually they'll have to resign?
I don't think there's going to be. I would hope that they resign, and I can't see that there's a place in academia. I've got many of my friends, their children are going off to university as we speak. They're preparing, they're getting ready to start uni, and they're terrified, they're afraid, and they know that if there are calls for genocide...
And so, I mean... I fear the answer is that this is not just limited to those three universities. I mean, how widespread is this?
I think there's a systemic problem in the West today where people are unable to speak out against anti-Semitism. And as I don't know a Jew that isn't questioning, do we have a future in the nations where we've felt at home for millennia?
It's truly awful, it's appalling, and I just don't know how anybody could frankly speak and think like that. Joseph, thank you so much for coming in. As I say, it's good to talk, but in a sense, we shouldn't be talking about this.
We shouldn't.
It's just appalling.
But thank you for
very much indeed. No, I really appreciate it. Well, on a lighter note, what the Farage moment. So, as you know, Nigel has been very keen to try and stop an asylum centre being placed at RAF Scampton. And he's fought very hard up there. He's been up there. Well, regrettably, this week, a High Court judge has ruled in favour of the Home Office against the local council that was trying to stop this planning application. So the council bosses, they've lost the case. They have said that they're going to appeal. And, of course, this is following another case where down in Braintree, RAF Wethersfield, that has also been approved by the High Court. So it looks at the moment that the High Court is favouring the Home Office as opposed to local councils. A little bit better news, folks. Maybe this is thanks to you. For the first time in a decade, cash has grown in use. Yes, cash is king. And it's now being used for 19% of transactions over the last 12 months, according to retailers. That's up significantly from 15% the previous year. So that's actually good news. People obviously using cash as a way of helping budgeting at a difficult time. So that's a little bit of good news. Now, we've gone from what the Farage to what the Tice. Because I have to say, coming into the studio today, I walked up the steps in Paddington Station. Just take a look at this. I mean, more signs than you can shake a stick at. I just want to walk up the steps. I don't want to be told. One step at a time. Don't rush. Hold the handrail. No mobiles. I mean, honestly, I'm not a moron. I know how to walk up a set of steps. Why do people waste time on this stuff? It's absurd. Why don't these people focus on actually getting the trains to run on time, making sure the signals work and they don't fail, getting the leaves off the line, and wasting time putting signs on steps? Absolutely ridiculous. But more good news, though. Nigel is in the jungle. We will be, of course, urging you, please vote for him this evening and the last 3 nights ahead. We'll be talking to Adam Cherry and, in the studio, Derek Chisora. Don't go anywhere. It's GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage, my friends. And I've calmed down after Stepgate. Anyway, talking of Nigel, of course, he is in the jungle. He's still there. We need to get him into the final, folks. That means we need every single vote possible. For the next 3 nights, you'll see the QR code on the screen, and also, hopefully, the telephone number if you don't vote through the app. Now, the great man, our reporter, Adam Cherry, he's down in Australia on the Gold Coast. There he is. He's changed out of that T-shirt. Adam, what's the latest? You look as though you're having a fantastic time. Any work going on?
Plenty of work, Richard. Yeah, I would just like to point out, I am wearing a different shirt today, but I just want to prove to you that after you floated that conspiracy theory yesterday, I've only got one shirt. Here's one, here's another. And
you've just picked up the same
T-shirt.
T-shirt.
So I have got plenty to go.
I'm only teasing. So listen,
I could have had the same one, but I've got plenty.
How's it getting on? Lots of chat yesterday. What do you think?
So yesterday we had a discussion about Brexit. They actually aired it. They actually aired a political discussion, if you can believe it. So this one was between Nigel, Josie and Tony. And I think without Fred and without Nella, it was less toxic. It was robust, but it didn't descend into complete chaos. So take a look at this. This is a fun clip.
They helped to shape more laws than the British Parliament.
And you didn't like some of the laws that were being made?
I didn't like the way they were being made. Well, once something had passed through the European legislative system, there was nothing the British Parliament could do to change it. Nothing.
So what were the main concern in European laws that you were frightened of?
Well, I think we should make our own laws on farming, fishing, financial services, the insurance industry. We should make our own laws on environmental law. We should be in charge of our own country. That's the point.
Great chat there, Adam.
There you have it. As I say, Yeah, a robust debate, but nothing too explosive. Actually, I would say that the mood in camp is changing now that we're down to the final 6. In fact, you even saw Danielle have a conversation with Nigel early in the show, where Nigel said, you know what, I'm quite touched and warmed by how welcoming everybody is. He expected claws out and a lot of fierce debate. Actually, everyone's being quite nice to him. So a sense of unity and togetherness in the camp, Richard.
But I suspect there's also a bit of tension because actually it's now getting to the really competitive end of the competition. What can we look forward to? Any tips as to what may happen this evening?
Well, I'll give you one little quick tip, and that is don't let Nigel be in charge of your cooking if you ever have him round for dinner.
I think that's a bit harsh. I think Nigel's a great cook from what I've seen and experienced. Maybe he needs the right facility.
Oh, OK. Oh, well, stay tuned.
Stay tuned, absolutely. Adam, you stay tuned. Keep us appraised. Thank you very much indeed. A fascinating few nights ahead. Well, obviously, with Nigel being in the last 6, we need to know what's happening to the betting odds. The markets have been moving big time. I'm delighted to be joined by the head of PR at Ladbrokes, no less, Nicola McGeady, who's down the line to tell us the latest. Nicola, a very good evening. Thanks for being with us. So I gather the market's been moving. Money's being made, money's being lost on Nigel. What's going on?
I'm a little bit jealous of Adam's location there. Mine's not quite as exotic, Richard. But yeah, you're right. The betting has been moving fast and it's all going in favour of Nigel in the last 24 hours. The urges that you're making for the public to vote for Nigel seem to be working. You know, his odds have more than halved since the start of the show. He's now 5-1. He was around 16-1 at the beginning.
Wow.
And there's no sign that he's going to be leaving tonight. He's 10-1 in the next elimination market. So he looks safe as houses tonight. I think because he's shown a different, softer side to himself, he mucks in with the team, he gets involved with the camp fun, he isn't afraid of trials, and you know, even if he does struggle, you see how gutted he is, and I think the public have warmed to that. So he's now
Nicola, the odds, you said he's 5-1 to win, and are there odds also on him getting to the final?
Well, I can offer you odds on him getting to the final, actually. He would be odds on now at this point. I'd say he's around 10-11 to make the final. Because if you look at Matt Hancock, he got really far, didn't he? And although politicians don't often win it, it seems the public quite like them, and Nigel could follow his path. But the big thing that stood out for me is that Josie Gibson, who was the favourite at the beginning of the show, is now further out in the betting than Nigel is, so he's more popular than her, a former reality TV star winner.
And just finally, Nicola, who are the top 3 to get to the final in the betting?
Yeah, so Sam, Tony and Nigel look like they'll be the 3 in the final. Sam is the big favourite, though, at 1-2, so I think people will really need to pick up the phones to vote for Nigel if they want him to beat Sam.
Absolutely will. Nicola, that's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there we are. You have it. It's very close. It's tense. So you've got to call that number from your mobile, 644-2409, or from your landline, 09020 442409, if you're not using the app where you get 5 free votes. I've got to remember to vote after I've been speaking to my next guest here in the studio, the one and only Derek Chisora, former British and Commonwealth heavyweight champion, and of course, 2-time world title challenger. Great to see you in the studio, Derek. Thanks for being with us. So you've never done this competition. Have you ever had the call?
No, I've had twice now.
Twice they've called?
And I've turned it down.
You've turned it down?
Yeah.
But having seen Nigel, you've been watching, are you tempted?
It's okay, but you know what? It's not for me yet.
Not for you yet? There's a sneaker yet?
Yet.
Could you deal with the snakes and the sort of the revolting stuff to eat? I mean, it wouldn't comply with your fitness program, Derek.
I think, you know what, to be honest with you, I think Nigel did very well on the pints of all that stuff.
That stuff was revolting. He's had a bit of practice drinking pints.
Yeah, so basically him just down in that pint, it was unbelievable.
I was
just straight gagging when he was drinking. Yeah. I was like, whoa. But,
absolutely.
You know, very well. For myself, I don't know if I could do it.
You couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I hate snakes. Absolutely hate snakes.
I hate snakes too.
Yeah.
On a mile.
For sure. But you know one of the other contestants. I mean, you know Nigel well, but you obviously know Tony Bellew well as well.
I know Nigel, I know Tony, I know Malvin.
Right.
So Malvin's kids go to the same school as my kids.
Cool.
And we go to the same birthday party.
So you're very conflicted.
I'm very conflicted, and I'm not rooting for anybody.
You're not rooting for everybody. Yeah. But are you tempted by the betting odds?
No, I don't bet.
You don't bet?
No, I don't.
Except on yourself to win. But in all seriousness, I mean, I think Tony Bellew's doing really well, actually.
No, Tony's doing very well.
He's an outstanding candidate.
I'm just waiting for him to lose his marbles, but he hasn't yet.
No,
so.
he hasn't. He's
doing very well.
He's doing really well. He's very committed. He's very friendly. He's got. I think people love his accent. I think he could surprise everybody.
I think him and Nigel head to head.
Him and Nigel head to head.
Yeah.
Interesting what Nicola was saying about Josie slipping in the odds. Because I thought Josie was an absolute nailed on to be in the final.
You know, when I was watching, I was like, you know what? I'm beginning to like Josie. And then when she became a camp leader, she kind of lost it a little bit.
She's lost it a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've been posting a lot on social media about Nigel. You've really been stirring
I've been posting
it up.
Nigel and Tony and Marvin, basically, because I know those three. So I've been just pushing.
They're all friends, so you're properly convicted.
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, here, in the studio. Just,
you know what?
No one's watching. Are you backing Nigel? Are you with us?
You know, on the hush-hush, don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone?
Yeah, I'm backing Nigel.
Good man, Derek. That's exactly what we want to hear. You might even have to have a small bet to break the habit of a lifetime. Derek, thank you very much indeed. Fantastic. Marvellous. Patrick, you've heard it there. Derek is backing Nigel. We're all backing Nigel. The odds are they're pouring in, coming in.
That's it now. He's king of the jungle. Yeah, you've got Derek here saying that he's going to back him. I mean, that's all the endorsement anyone could ever need.
Absolutely right. But actually, Derek's not tempted to go to the jungle either. He's turned it down twice.
Yeah, £1.5 million though. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. Well, folks, it is tense. It is tight. I'm going to read that number. I need you to call 644-2409 on the mobile. 0902. Have I got that right? Yes. 09020442409 from your landlord. The QR code's there to make Nigel the king of the jungle. King of the 9 o'clock show. Patrick, what's coming up? You've got another extraordinary exclusive.
Rishi Sunak hit back at our political editor Christopher Hope today for yesterday's exclusive from Calais, which showed that the numbers of people looking to cross the channel are as high as they've ever been. He said that he's managed to cut the number of Albanians coming. Well, I've got an exclusive tonight which appears to blow the doors off that. I think we have a little clip that I might be able to play you now.
Let's just take a look at that.
The number of the Albanians on the boats might be down by 90%, but make no mistake, they're still coming. They're arriving, hiding in the back of the trucks. The Albanian gangs seek out willingly, usually Polish lorry drivers. They pay them to smuggle them across Europe and then across the channel in the back of their...
All of this focus on Rwanda, all of this focus on small boats, we expose on my show, Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, that the lorries issue is absolutely monumental and no one's talking about that.
No one's talking about that because there was a big number last year. It was many thousands, I think approaching 10,000 came illegally through other routes. And because of the 45,000 or so coming on the boats, that was the focus. But I've never quite believed about the Albanian numbers declining. I sensed something else was going on.
Yeah, bear in mind that the human traffickers we exposed yesterday are to blame for a large part for the reduction in the boats because they're trying to up their prices by making it more of an exclusive trip, if that makes sense. And now we're showing what's going on with the lorries. Mark White reveals a heck of a lot tonight between 9 and 11 on my show. Patrick Christie tonight, don't miss it.
Absolutely right. But, I mean, this whole Rwanda policy is a distraction from actually stopping the boats, processing people quickly, and that then becomes a proper deterrent, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, this is it. And he waxed lyrical today again about the deterrent that they're posing. We exposed yesterday that people were just laughing at Rwanda, that it was the butt of the joke, and it is still kind of El Dorado here in the UK for a lot of people.
And when Christopher Hope, the political editor, asked the Prime Minister this morning about that, he wasn't that wasn't that comfortable or amused by the question.
He said, facts are facts, boat crossings are down 30%. Yep, OK, but the facts that we show you tonight show that the lorry crossings are taking place at a pace, and I think that is what he doesn't want us to know.
No, I mean, and that's the point, is we don't know how big that percentage is, but this is the point, folks, that the boats might be down 30%, it's still 30,000 people coming across this year alone. The cost of that is absolutely vast. I reckon there's over $1 billion in the first year, and then you've got a huge number coming in the lorries.
We've got footage of people getting into the lorries, the tactics they're using, and Mark White has been out on the ground with his team to talk to these people as well. So we've got it straight from the horse's mouth tonight.
Absolutely unbelievable. Make sure you watch that, folks. It is going to be a fantastic show. Make sure, of course, you need both TVs on to watch Patrick and to watch Nigel. You need to vote. There is no question about that. You've got the QR code. I've read out the number. Derek, I need to just check before signing off. Have you voted yet for Nigel? Or you're so conflicted?
I voted 3 times.
You voted 3 times?
Yeah, but tonight I might vote 1 time.
Just 1 time? Then you've got to make a decision, Derek.
I did already.
You did already?
Yeah, I'll be voting for Nigel.
Thank you, Derek. Fantastic. I'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend, folks. It's the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Today's rain slowly clearing away this evening. Tomorrow a bit drier and brighter in the east, but there will be more heavy showers and it stays pretty blustery. Its eastern areas still very soggy this evening. Still Met Office yellow weather warnings in place. The rain does clear away, all but the far northeast. Some showers come into the west, many places having clear spells overnight. Temperatures dropping to about 5 or 6 degrees in most towns and cities, maybe a little lower in 1 or 2 spots. Could be some mist and fog around tomorrow morning, particularly over eastern areas. A bit of a glum start here, but in eastern England it should brighten up, and then most of the day will be dry here. But elsewhere, expect more showers. Quite a wet day again for Northern Ireland. Frequent showers for Wales, northwest England, and across much of Scotland as well. In the sunny spells in the south, 12, maybe 13 Celsius. Generally a little bit warmer than today, but not feeling all that warm when the showers come along and the gusty winds. Another spell of rain then comes in Friday night and into Saturday. That spreads north during Saturday, lingering over parts of southern Scotland and northern England. The south will brighten up on Saturday afternoon with some decent spells of sunshine, staying mostly dry across the far north, staying quite chilly here, but in the south we should, with a bit of sunshine, get into the teens by Saturday. Low pressure systems continue to bring more wet and windy weather. We're keeping a close eye on this one. Could bring another spell of wet and very windy weather for some on Sunday.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the